The polished cockpit of the Gulfstream G650 was silent, thick with an icy tension that had nothing to do with the altitude. Captain Mark Harrison, a man whose crisp uniform matched his rigid demeanor, stared at his new first officer. "I've checked your papers, F.O. Reed," he said, his voice a low, condescending drawl, "and I'm not satisfied. I will not compromise the safety of this aircraft or my passengers. I refuse to fly with you." First Officer Evelyn Reed met his gaze, her dark eyes unblinking. The refusal was blatant, a slap in the face she had felt before, but never from the left seat. But this time, Captain Harrison had no idea who he was talking to. The private aviation terminal at Teterboro Airport, TEB, was a world unto itself. It was a place where time didn't just fly, it was commanded. Sleek, billion-dollar jets were parked with the casualness of luxury sedans in a Beverly Hills driveway. This was the domain of Captain Mark Harrison. At 58, Harrison was the epitome of the Silver Fox pilot. With over 20,000 flight hours and a spotless record, he was a senior captain at Summit Executive Air, one of the most exclusive charter services in the world. He flew titans of industry, royalty, and A-list celebrities. In his mind, he wasn't just a pilot. He was a guardian, a gatekeeper of the stratosphere. His arrogance was as much a part of his uniform as his epaulets. He stood on the ramp, hands clasped behind his back, inspecting the Gulfstream G650 he was about to command. It was chassis number 703, call sign N900SA, a $70 million marvel of engineering, and his to command for the next 5 hours to Aspen. His passengers, the billionaire industrialist Arthur Thompson and his wife, were expected in 30 minutes. "Where?" he muttered to a passing ground crew member, "is my first officer?" "Should be here any minute, Captain. Flight plan is filed. Ready for your sign-off," the young man replied, careful to stay on Harrison's good side. Harrison nodded curtly and stepped into the FBO, fixed base operator, lounge to review the flight package. He saw her name on the roster, E. Reed. He didn't recognize it, probably new. He sighed. He hated breaking in new FOs, especially on a high-profile leg like this one. They were always too green, too nervous, or, worse, too cocky. A moment later, the glass doors of the FBO slid open. A woman walked in, pulling a standard-issue rolling flight bag. She was tall, poised, and wearing the crisp white shirt and black trousers of a Summit pilot uniform, the gold stripes of a first officer on her epaulets. And she was black. Harrison felt an immediate, involuntary tightening in his chest. He prided himself on being a professional, but his professionalism was built on a foundation of decades-old biases. He associated the cockpit with men who looked like him. He'd flown with women before, reluctantly, but this felt different. He watched as she greeted the dispatch agent with a warm, confident smile. She spotted him and walked over, extending her hand. "Captain Harrison, I'm Evelyn Reed. I'll be your first officer for the trip to Aspen." Harrison looked at her hand for a beat too long before taking it. His handshake was limp, dismissive. "First officer, you're late." Evelyn glanced at the Breitling on her wrist. "Sir, I'm 45 minutes prior to scheduled departure. Our pre-flight briefing isn't for another 10 minutes. I'd say I'm precisely on time." Her voice was smooth, educated, and utterly devoid of intimidation. This annoyed Harrison even more. "Punctuality is the cornerstone of discipline, Reed. Let's see your certifications." This was not standard procedure. All certs were on file with the company. Requesting to see the physical copies was an implication, a test. Evelyn said nothing. She calmly unzipped a side pocket of her flight bag and produced her pilot's license, her medical certificate, and her type rating for the G650. Harrison snatched them. He scrutinized every line, every hologram. He was looking for a flaw. Hampton University, he noted, his lip curling slightly. Got your hours in their program, did you? I did, Evelyn replied, her voice remaining level. And I finished top of my class. My FAA license is unrestricted, and I have 500 hours in this airframe, Captain. Are my qualifications satisfactory? The subtext was clear. Stop wasting my time. Harrison handed the cards back, his face sour. We'll see. The G650 is a complex machine. It doesn't tolerate checklist jockeys. It requires intuitive skill. I'm sure it does, Captain, Evelyn said, sliding her licenses back into her bag. Shall we begin the pre-flight? I'd like to check the weather advisories over the Rockies. He grunted and led the way to the aircraft. For the next 20 minutes they performed the walk-around. Harrison was relentless. He didn't just follow her, he stalked her. Every panel she checked, he rechecked. Every pin she pulled, he inspected. He questioned her fuel calculations, suggesting she'd miscalculated the headwind component. Evelyn simply pulled up the data on her tablet. My calculation is correct, Captain. Based on the Aero 900Z wind data, we'll have a 110-knot tailwind component at flight level 430, putting our fuel at arrival well above minimums. I even factored in a potential hold for Aspen's weather. She was right. She was perfectly, irritatingly right. His condescension was sliding off her like rain off the polished aluminum wing. This only fueled his frustration. He felt his authority being challenged, not by her words, but by her sheer, unflappable competence. Just then, a black Cadillac Escalade pulled up to the jet. Arthur Thompson, a man whose face was on the cover of Forbes, stepped out with his wife, Amelia. Harrison's demeanor instantly changed. He plastered on his commanding officer smile. Mr. Thompson, Mrs. Thompson, welcome aboard. Mark Harrison, I'll be your captain today. A beautiful morning to fly. Good to see you, Mark, Thompson said, shaking his hand firmly. He then nodded politely to Evelyn. First officer. Welcome aboard, Mr. and Mrs. Thompson, Evelyn said, with a genuine smile that Harrison found infuriating. How dare she be so at ease with a man of this stature? She seems new, Amelia Thompson whispered to Harrison, loud enough for Evelyn to hear. Harrison leaned in conspiratorially. She is, Ma'am. Don't you worry your head about it. I'll be handling everything today. The left seat is where the real flying happens. Evelyn, who was opening the main cabin door, paused. She turned, her gaze locking with Harrison's. It was a look of cold, precise warning. He had just crossed a line, not just of professionalism, but of basic decency. She said nothing, instead focusing on her duties. Please watch your step, Mrs. Thompson. Welcome to 900 SA. The passengers settled into the plush, cream-colored leather seats. The flight attendant, a young woman named Chloe, began the beverage service. In the cockpit, the atmosphere was now Arctic. Right, Harrison said, strapping into the left seat. Let's get this pre-flight checklist done, and I want to hear every single item, aloud. No skipping. Understood, Captain, Evelyn said, strapping into the right seat. She began the flow, her hands moving with practiced efficiency over the complex avionics. Her voice was a calm monotone as she read the checklist, but Harrison interrupted her at every turn. Check the oxygen mask pressure again. I already have, Captain. It's 1850 psi in the green. Check it, again. She did, without protest. Did you cross-check the transponder code with the dispatch release? Yes, Captain. Code 4732. It matches. He was trying to rattle her, to find the mistake that would prove his ugly, internal narrative correct. He needed her to fail, but Evelyn Reed didn't fail. Finally, they were at the last item. Pre-flight checklist complete, Evelyn stated. Good, Harrison said, his knuckles white as he gripped the yoke. He keyed his mic to call for clearance. Teterboro ground, Summit 900 SA, ready to copy IFR to Aspen. He got the clearance and taxied them to the runway. But as they held short, waiting for a landing NetJet's plane, Harrison did something extraordinary. He powered down the number 2 avionics suite. "What are you doing, Captain?" Evelyn asked, alarmed. "Running a diagnostic," he lied. "I thought I saw a flicker." There was no flicker. All systems are green. "Are you questioning my command, First Officer?" He snarled. "I am questioning an unnecessary and non-standard procedure, moments before takeoff. Yes." He powered it back up. He was testing her. He was trying to find the breaking point. He turned to her, his face a mask of contempt. "You know, Reed," he said, his voice dropping so the cockpit voice recorder might not catch the venom. "Some people just aren't built for this kind of pressure. This isn't a regional jet. This is the big leagues. It takes a certain disposition." "Are you cleared to fly, Captain?" Evelyn asked, her voice dangerously quiet. "You seem agitated." That was it. The final straw. He had tried to put her in her place subtly, and she had resisted. Now he would use the full force of his authority. He unbuckled his seatbelt. The fasten seatbelt chime rang through the cockpit. "Captain, what are you doing? We are number 1 for takeoff." "I've made my decision," Harrison said, standing up as much as he could in the confined space. He turned to face her. "I've checked your papers, F.O. Reed, and I'm not satisfied. I will not compromise the safety of this aircraft or my passengers. I refuse to fly with you." Evelyn stared at him. The bluntness of it, the sheer, unadulterated bigotry, was stunning. "On what grounds, Captain?" she asked, her voice like ice. "On the grounds of my authority as pilot in command," he snapped. "I don't feel you are competent. Your attitude is combative, and I have a bad feeling. In this business, we trust our gut. My gut tells me you are a risk. I'm calling operations and having you replaced." He reached for his phone to call the chief pilot, a man named Bill Peterson, who he played golf with every Tuesday. He would paint her as hysterical, incompetent, and aggressive. It was his word against hers, and he knew whose word Bill would take. "Captain," Evelyn said, her voice cutting through his self-assured rage, "I suggest you sit down, buckle your belt, and advance the throttles. We are cleared for takeoff." "You are relieved of duty, First Officer," Harrison barked. "Get off my aircraft." "No," Evelyn said simply. Harrison's face went purple. "What did you say?" "I said no. You are not relieving me of duty. And this is not your aircraft." The silence in the cockpit was a living thing. It was heavy, suffocating. The Teterboro Tower controller's voice crackled over the radio, suddenly sounding very far away. "Summit 900 say, wind 290 at 8, runway 01, cleared for takeoff." Evelyn keyed her mic, her voice betraying no emotion. "Tower, Summit 900 say is holding short. We have a cockpit discrepancy. We'll need to taxi back to the ramp." "Roger. Summit 900 SA. Return to the ramp at your discretion. Advise when ready." Harrison was apoplectic. "You did what? You just refused a takeoff clearance. You've embarrassed me. You've embarrassed this company." "You refuse to fly, Captain," Evelyn stated, her hands already moving, resetting the avionics for taxi. "I am complying with your refusal. We are returning to the FBO." "You're finished, Reed. Do you hear me? Finished!" Harrison was jabbing his finger at her. "I'm calling Bill Peterson right now. You'll be cleaning toilets at LaGuardia by tomorrow." He pulled out his iPhone and speed-dialed the chief pilot. He turned his back to her, creating the illusion of privacy. "Bill, Mark Harrison. Yeah, I'm on the G650 at Teterboro. Listen, I've got a problem. It's this new FO, Reed. Reed. Yeah, the new one," She's a disaster. Combative, unprofessional. I think she's unstable. She froze up during the checklist. And then I caught her. Yeah, I caught her running a bad fuel calculation. I had to stop her. No, I'm not comfortable flying with her. I'm refusing. It's a safety issue, Bill. A direct safety of flight issue. You need to get me a replacement now. Thompson is on board. I know. I'll handle Thompson. Just get someone else here. He hung up, a smug, victorious look on his face. It's done. Peterson is sending a replacement FO from Westchester. Should be here in an hour. Your career, on the other hand, is over. Pack your bag. Evelyn simply sat there, observing him. She hadn't moved. She hadn't flinched. She looked at him with an expression he couldn't quite decipher. It wasn't anger. It was pity. "Are you quite finished, Mark?" she asked. The use of his first name was a new violation. "That's Captain Harrison to you. And yes, I am. Now get out." "Okay," Evelyn said. She unbuckled her own harness, but instead of getting up to leave, she reached for her own phone. "Who are you calling?" Harrison scoffed. "Your union rep?" "Good luck. They won't stand a chance against a PIC's safety report." Evelyn dialed a number from her contacts. It rang once. "David, it's Evelyn," she said, her voice suddenly shifting. The polite, professional FO was gone. In her place was a voice of absolute, effortless command. "I'm in the G650, N900 SA at Teterboro. We have a situation. Yes, a ground stop. Captain Harrison has just refused to fly, citing safety concerns." She paused, listening. Harrison watched, a sick, cold feeling starting to bloom in his stomach. Who was David? "His concern," Evelyn continued, her eyes locking on Harrison's, "is me. He believes I am incompetent, unstable, and a safety risk. He just got off the phone with Bill Peterson, demanding my replacement. Yes. Oh, he was very clear." She listened again, then nodded. "I agree. That's the only option. Please execute, and have airport security meet the aircraft. He is to be escorted off the property immediately. Thank you, David." She hung up. Harrison's bravado faltered. What was that? Who is David? You can't have me escorted. I am the captain." "You were the captain," Evelyn said, her voice cutting. "Captain Harrison, you just made two catastrophic mistakes. The first was your blatant, disgusting bigotry. The second was not reading your employee orientation packet." "What are you talking about?" "Summit Executive Air is a subsidiary," Evelyn explained, as if to a child. "It's the aviation arm of our larger logistics and aerospace holding company, a company called Reed Axton Aerospace." Harrison's blood pressure, already high, skyrocketed. He knew that name. Everyone in aviation knew that name. Reed Axton was a giant. They built navigation components for Gulfstream, for Boeing, for the military. "Reed Axton," he whispered, his eyes widening in dawning horror. "My full name, Captain," she said, standing up, "is Evelyn Reed. My father was Thomas Reed. My partner is Michael Axton. I am the co-founder, majority shareholder, and CEO of Reed Axton Aerospace. I own Summit Executive Air. I own this Gulfstream. And you, Mark, are standing on my flight deck, refusing to fly my airplane." The color drained from Mark Harrison's face. He didn't just turn pale, he turned a ghastly, waxy white. The smugness, the arrogance, the rage, it all evaporated, replaced by a raw, primal terror. He looked at the confident, intelligent black woman he had just tried to humiliate. He saw her not as a diversity hire or a checklist jockey, but as the billionaire titan of industry she was. The woman who signed his paychecks. The woman whose name was, quite literally, on the side of the FBO. Miss Reed, he stammered, his hands visibly shaking. I didn't know. There's been a misunderstanding. A terrible misunderstanding. No, Mark, Evelyn said, her voice utterly cold. There has been no misunderstanding. You understood perfectly. You saw a black woman in your cockpit, and you assumed she was beneath you. You assumed she was unqualified. You assumed you could bully her, lie about her, and end her career to protect your fragile ego. No, please. I was just... procedure. The stress. You thought you saw an easy target, Evelyn interrupted. You ranted to Bill Peterson about the unstable FO. What you didn't know is that Bill Peterson reports to David Mills, our COO. And David Mills reports directly to me. The David I just spoke to. Your call to Bill. It was, for all intents and purposes, a confession, directly to your boss's boss. Before Harrison could plead further, a rap echoed at the cockpit door. Evelyn opened it. The flight attendant, Chloe, stood there, looking terrified. Mum, Captain, Mr. Thompson is very upset. He's asking what the delay is. Thank you, Chloe, Evelyn said calmly. Please tell Mr. Thompson that I will be out to speak with him momentarily. We are just changing out the captain. Changing the... Harrison looked panicked. Evelyn, Ms. Reed, please don't do this. I have a family, my record, 20,000 hours. Think of my career. I am thinking of it, Evelyn said. I'm thinking it's over. You just fabricated a safety of flight issue to ground an aircraft based on racial prejudice. That's not just an HR violation, Mark. That's an FAA violation. You have proven yourself fundamentally, emotionally, and ethically unfit to sit in that seat. She pointed to the door. Get your bags and get off my aircraft. Mark Harrison's world had compressed into a single, horrifying point. The roar of his own blood in his ears was louder than the APU whining outside. He was trapped. The woman he had tried to destroy held his entire life in her hands, and she was closing her fist. Please, he tried one last time, his voice a pathetic croak. A suspension. A fine. I'll take sensitivity training. Anything. I was wrong. I was terribly wrong. I apologize. I apologize, Ms. Reed. Your apology is rejected, Evelyn said flatly. It's not for me. It's for your career, and it's about 2 minutes too late. The men you called to replace me? They're not coming. But the men I called to replace you are. As if on cue, 2 uniformed airport security officers and a stern-looking man in a dark suit appeared at the aircraft's main door, which Chloe, the flight attendant, was holding open. The man in the suit was David Mills, the COO. Captain Harrison, David said, his voice clipped and final. You are relieved of duty, effective immediately. Your employment with Summit Executive Air is terminated, for cause. Please gather your personal effects and escort yourself off the aircraft. For cause? Harrison shrieked, the word echoing in the quiet cabin. You can't. My union. Your union has already been notified, Mark, David said, stepping inside. They were informed of your direct insubordination, your violation of federal EEO laws, and your fabrication of a safety report. They are not touching this. The passengers, Arthur and Amelia Thompson, were now standing in the galley, watching the scene unfold with wide, shocked eyes. What in God's name is going on here? Arthur Thompson demanded. Mark, what is this? Harrison, desperate, turned to the billionaire. Mr. Thompson, thank God, this woman, this foe, she's lying. She's having me fired. Tell them, Arthur. Tell them what a good pilot I am. 20,000 hours. Evelyn Reed stepped out of the cockpit, buttoning the jacket of her uniform. She looked at her client, her expression one of composed regret. "Mr. Thompson, my deepest apologies for this disturbance. My name is Evelyn Reed. I am the CIO of Summit Air." Arthur Thompson's jaw dropped. He knew of Reed Axton Aerospace. He had holdings in the company. He had never met the CEO. "Ms. Reed, I had no idea. I was performing a quarterly line check and filling in for a pilot on leave," Evelyn explained. "Unfortunately, Captain Harrison has just demonstrated a prejudice that we do not tolerate at this company. He refused to fly because of my race, fabricated a safety report to have me removed, and grounded this flight. He is being terminated for it." Thompson's face, normally jovial, hardened into granite. He looked from Evelyn's calm, authoritative face to Harrison's sweating, panicked one. "Mark, is that true?" Thompson asked, his voice dangerously low. "No, it was a misunderstanding about her qualifications," Harrison stammered. "He told my wife I was new and not to worry because he'd be handling the real flying," Evelyn provided, her voice cutting. "He did it right in front of me." Amelia Thompson gasped. "He did! He said that! Arthur, that's exactly what he said." Thompson's gaze on Harrison turned to pure disgust. "You idiot!" Thompson hissed. "You absolute self-important fool! Get out of my sight!" That was the final nail. The loss of his job was one thing. The public humiliation in front of a man he had idolized, a man who represented the pinnacle of the world he served, was a death blow. "Sir, your bag," one of the security officers said, pointing to the cockpit. Numbly, Harrison moved past Evelyn, refusing to look at her. He grabbed his flight bag and his small suitcase. Every step was a new humiliation. He had to walk the length of the G6L50's cabin, past the wide-eyed, silent flight attendant, past the 2 security guards, past his COO, and past the furious, disgusted faces of his most important clients. He descended the air stairs, his legs feeling like lead. The bright, cold New Jersey air hit his face. He was no longer Captain Harrison. He was just Mark, a 58-year-old man, unemployed, standing on a ramp he used to command. One of the security officers followed him down. "This way, sir. We'll escort you to your vehicle." "I know where my car is," Harrison spat. "It's not a request, sir. Your airport credentials have been revoked. You are now trespassing on the cider." His badge, his access, gone in less than 10 minutes. He was marched through the FBO he had strode through like a king only an hour before. The dispatch agents, the ground crew, the other pilots, everyone stopped to watch the perp walk. The word was already spreading. Captain Harrison, fired, on the ramp. Back on the G650, Evelyn had taken the left seat. "David," she said into her phone, "get me Captain Davies. I know he's on reserve. Have him here in 10. To the cockpit she called, "Chloe, please close the main door, and offer Mr. and Mrs. Thompson our most sincere apologies. Let them know we will be airborne in 15 minutes. "Who is flying the plane, Ms. Reed?" Chloe asked, her voice trembling slightly. Evelyn strapped herself into the captain's seat. "I am. Captain Davies will serve as my first officer." She put on the headset and keyed the mic. "Teterboro Ground, Summit 900 SA. Back at the summit ramp. We are sorting out a crew change. We'll be ready for taxi in 15. "Roger. Summit 900 SA, the controller replied, the curiosity evident even in his professional tone. Evelyn began the pre-flight check again, this time by herself. Her hands were steady, her voice was calm. But inside, a cold fury burned. It wasn't triumph she felt. It was exhaustion. She had worked twice as hard as any man, 10 times as hard as any white man, to get to where she was. She had built an empire from scratch, earned her licenses, and mastered the most complex machines in the sky. And still, to men like Mark Harrison, she was just a new black girl who didn't belong. "Well," she said to the empty cockpit, "he belongs to the ramp now." 10 minutes later, a breathless but professional Captain Davies strapped into the right seat. He looked at Evelyn in the captain's chair and didn't bat an eye. "Ma'am, good to be flying with you." "You too, Captain," Evelyn said. "Let's get these people to Aspen." As they taxied past the FBO, Evelyn caught a glimpse of Mark Harrison, standing by a security checkpoint, arguing with a guard who was holding his now useless ID badge. He looked small, pathetic, and utterly defeated. The flight to Aspen was flawless. Evelyn Reed flew the G650 with the smooth, intuitive skill that Harrison had falsely claimed to possess. She handled the high-altitude arrival into Aspen-Wauksh-Pitkin County Airport, KC, notorious for its tricky mountain approach, with textbook precision. When they landed, Arthur Thompson made a point to come to the cockpit. "Ms. Reed," he said, his voice full of respect. "That was one of the finest landings I've ever experienced, and I've experienced many." "Thank you, Mr. Thompson. We aim to please," Evelyn replied, unbuckling. I also want to apologize for what happened at Teterboro," he said, his face clouding over. "The behavior of that man, it was disgusting, unacceptable." "I agree," Evelyn said simply. "And it has been handled. Please enjoy your time in Aspen. Your return flight will be crewed by Captain Davies and a senior FO from our Denver hub." "No," Thompson said. "I'd prefer if you were on the flight, Ms. Reed. In fact, my company is looking to purchase a new aircraft. Perhaps you and I could have dinner tomorrow night to discuss a fleet management contract with Summit." Evelyn smiled. "I would be delighted, Mr. Thompson. My office will be in touch." As the Thompsons deplaned, Evelyn finally allowed herself a moment. She had not only averted a crisis, but she had also just secured a 9-figure contract, all because she'd been in the right seat at the right time. The irony was bitter, but the victory was sweet. Meanwhile, 2,000 miles away, Mark Harrison's life was imploding. After being thrown out of Teterboro, he had driven to his sprawling suburban New Jersey home in a blind rage. He was counting on his union, on his friend Bill Peterson, on the old boys network that had protected him his entire life. He called his union rep, a man named Tom Llewellyn. "Tom, it's Mark Harrison. You need to file a grievance right now. I've been terminated, wrongfully." There was a long, tired sigh on the other end of the line. "Mark, I got the call from Summit's legal. I can't help you." "What do you mean, you can't help me? I pay my dues. I was fired by an FO. She had me escorted off the plane." "Mark, she wasn't an FO. She was Evelyn Reed, the owner. You refused to fly with the CEO of the company." "It was a mistake. I didn't know." "It doesn't matter," Tom said, his voice flat. "You didn't just refuse to fly, Mark. You lied. You filed a false safety report. You cited instability and incompetence against a pilot who not only has more time in type than you, but who owns the company. And you did it, by all accounts, because she's black. You told Bill Peterson she was an affirmative action hire who was going to kill someone. Bill's statement is already on file with HR." Harrison went cold. Bill gave a statement. He had to, Mark. He was protecting his own job. It was either him or you. You put him in an impossible position." The old boys' network wasn't a fortress. It was a line of dominoes. And he was the first one to fall. "There's nothing I can do, Mark," Tom concluded. "The union won't touch a termination for cause. based on documented racial discrimination and FAA violations. You're on your own." He hung up. Harrison was stunned. The next blow came an hour later. His wife, Jessica, who was at her country club, called him. "Mark, my card was just declined. At the pro shop. It's humiliating. What is going on?" "Jessica, I lost my job," he mumbled. "You what?" "What do you mean you lost your job? You're a senior captain." "There was an incident." "An incident? Mark, we have the mortgage. We have the club dues. We have the boat payment. You fix this. You call Bill, you call your friends, and you fix this now." "I can't," he whispered. I think I'm in serious trouble." The trouble was just beginning. The private aviation community is incredibly small. It's a world built on reputation. A pilot who is fired for cause, especially for something as toxic as racism, is radioactive. Before Harrison's plane had even landed in Aspen, the text messages and whisper network calls had already lit up the phones of every chief pilot at Teterboro, Westchester, and Miami-Opa-locka. "Did you hear about Harrison at Summit? Refused to fly with his FO." "Yeah, because she was black. Get this. She was Evelyn Reed, the CEO. No. Yes. Fired on the spot. Walked off the ramp by security. Serves him right. Idiot." By the time he woke up the next morning, Mark Harrison was not just unemployed. He was unemployable. He had a type rating for the GeoWefty and the Global Express, certifications that cost hundreds of thousands of dollars to acquire. They made him one of the highest-paid pilots in the world. He started making calls, scrambling to get a new job before the "for cause" termination hit his official record. He called the chief pilot at NetJets. "Hey, Paul, it's Mark Harrison. I'm, looking to make a change. Heard you guys were hiring." "Not interested, Mark," the pilot said coldly. "But my resume. 20,000 hours. I know what you did, Mark. We don't have a place for that kind of judgment here. Don't call this office again." Click. He tried FlexJet. The same result. He tried a smaller, mid-level charter outfit. The director of operations actually laughed at him. "Are you insane? Hiring you would be a liability nightmare. The entire industry knows what you did. You're a walking lawsuit." But the final, most devastating blow came not from a pilot, but from Arthur Thompson. Thompson was not just a passenger. He was on the oversight board for several powerful aviation lobbying groups and sat on the advisory committee for the FAA's safety standards. He was incensed by what he had witnessed. He made one call to a friend high up at the FAA. He didn't make a threat. He just expressed his deep concern about a pilot, a Captain Mark Harrison, who willingly and knowingly fabricated a safety of flight issue for personal, discriminatory reasons. He wondered aloud if such a man's judgment and moral character were compatible with holding an airline transport pilot license. That call triggered a formal investigation. Harrison received a certified letter from the FAA. His medical certificate was suspended, pending a full psychological evaluation. Without a medical, he couldn't fly. Period. He was grounded. He was no longer a pilot. He was just a man in a very expensive house he could no longer afford. The karma was swift, but it was not yet complete. 6 months passed. Mark Harrison's life had been systematically dismantled. His wife, Jessica, had left him. She couldn't tolerate the fall from grace, the loss of status, the evaporation of their savings as he tried to keep up with the mortgage. The divorce was messy, and she took him for everything she could. He was forced to sell the New Jersey mansion at a massive loss in a fire sale. The boat was repossessed. The country club membership was a joke. He was living in a small, rented condo in a faceless development, his days spent watching daytime television and marinating in his own bitterness. He had become obsessed. This was not his fault. It was a setup. Evelyn Reed had trapped him. She wanted this to happen. She was a social justice warrior who had made an example of him. He was the victim. Fueled by this delusional rage, he found a bottom-feeding lawyer, a man named Carl Jennings, who specialized in wrongful termination cases. Jennings saw a high-profile target, a billionaire CEO, and the potential for a massive, quick settlement. They filed a lawsuit against Summit executive heir and Evelyn Reed personally. The charges: 1. Wrongful termination, claiming he was fired without due process. 2. Defamation, claiming Evelyn Reed and Arthur Thompson had slandered his name and blacklisted him in the industry. 3. Hostile work environment. In a truly twisted piece of legal jujitsu, Harrison claimed he was the one subjected to a hostile environment by an aggressive and insubordinate FO, who then used her power as CEO to retaliate against him. He sought $20 million in damages for lost lifetime earnings and emotional distress. "We'll bleed her dry in discovery," Jennings promised, rubbing his hands together. "These corporate types hate bad press. They'll settle. We'll be on a beach in a month." When Evelyn Reed received the summons, she didn't even sigh. She simply forwarded it to her corporate legal team, a pack of sharks from one of the most expensive firms in New York. "Do not settle," was her only instruction. "I want this to go to court. I want him destroyed, publicly. Use everything." The lawyers were delighted. "With pleasure, Ms. Reed." The discovery process began. Jennings, Harrison's lawyer, sent over a mountain of requests, demanding emails, personnel files, and flight logs. Evelyn's team complied, sending back thousands of pages of pristine, professional records. They also sent their own discovery requests. And they didn't just ask for his personnel file. They subpoenaed Mark Harrison's personal cell phone records for the day of the incident, his personal emails and text messages for the past 5 years, his social media history, including his private Facebook account, the deposition of his ex-wife, Jessica Harrison, the deposition of Chief Pilot Bill Peterson, the deposition of the flight attendant, Chloe, the deposition of Arthur and Amelia Thompson. Harrison and Jennings suddenly found themselves buried. "This is an invasion of privacy," Jennings blustered in a pre-trial hearing. "Mr. Harrison is suing for emotional distress and claiming he is not a racist." Evelyn's lead counsel, a terrifyingly sharp woman named Ann Barrett, replied to the judge. "His private communications are therefore directly relevant to his state of mind and the truthfulness of his claims. We believe they will establish a long-standing pattern of discriminatory animus." The judge, seeing the logic, agreed. "Motion to compel granted. Mr. Harrison will turn over the records." This was the twist. This was the hard karma that went beyond simply losing a job. Mark Harrison, the victim, was about to be exposed as the monster he was. His text messages to other pilots were a cesspool. For years he had complained about the diversity hires, the cockpit quotas, and the token females. He used racial slurs and misogynistic language freely, always assuming he was among friends. His private Facebook was worse. He had shared dozens of memes mocking Black Lives Matter, posts about illegal aliens, and screeds about the good old days when men were men. But the smoking gun was the deposition of Bill Peterson, the chief pilot he thought was his friend. Peterson, under oath, was forced to tell the truth. Barrett: "Mr. Peterson, please recount your phone call with Captain Harrison on the morning of the incident." Peterson, visibly sweating: He called me from the plane. He said the FO, Ms. Reed, was a problem. Barrett. What kind of problem? Peterson. He said she was combative and incompetent. Barrett. Did he say anything else? Anything about her qualifications? Peterson. Yes. He said, I don't know which diversity box she ticked, Bill, but she's going to kill someone. And he called her an affirmative action hire. Barrett. An affirmative action hire. Did he ever mention an actual specific safety violation she committed? Peterson. No, not a specific one, just that he had a bad feeling and wouldn't fly with her. It was over. The lawsuit was dead. Jennings, Harrison's lawyer, saw the evidence and immediately called for a settlement. Mark, we have to drop this. They'll countersue us for malicious prosecution. No, Harrison roared. He's lying. Peterson is lying to protect her. It doesn't matter, Jennings screamed back. They have your texts. They have your Facebook. They have the flight attendant who heard you insult Miss Reed to the passengers. We are going to lose, and you are going to be bankrupt. But it was too late. Evelyn's legal team wasn't interested in a settlement. They filed a motion for summary judgment, attaching all the evidence, the texts, the Facebook posts, the depositions, as exhibits. These documents were now part of the public record. The press, who had been sniffing around the high-profile case, found them. The next day, the New York Post ran a front-page story. Pilot peril, racist texts of fired captain who sued billionaire black CEO revealed. The article was brutal. It included screenshots of his most vile texts and Facebook posts. It detailed his hostile work environment claim and contrasted it with the depositions of Peterson and the Thompsons. He wasn't just an unemployed pilot anymore. He was a public pariah, a cartoon villain of modern bigotry. The judge threw out the lawsuit, dismissing every single one of Harrison's claims with prejudice, meaning he could never file them again. And, in a final, crushing blow, the judge found that the lawsuit was frivolous, vexatious, and filed in bad faith. He ordered Mark Harrison to pay the entirety of the legal fees for Summit Executive Air and Evelyn Reed. The bill came to $487,000. Mark Harrison was officially, irreversibly ruined. The judgment bankrupted him. Any assets he had hidden from his ex-wife were seized. He was forced to declare Chapter 7 bankruptcy, a complete liquidation of his life. The rented condo was gone. His car was repossessed. At 59 years old, Mark Harrison was homeless, penniless, and notorious. The FAA investigation, spurred on by the lawsuit's public evidence, concluded. They revoked his airline transport pilot license permanently, citing moral character unfit to command. The psychological evaluation he had been forced to take had come back with scathing results, painting him as a severe narcissist with deep-seated impulse control issues and prejudicial biases that make him a danger in a high-stress environment. He was finished. The career he had spent 30 years building, the identity he had wrapped himself in, was gone. He drifted. He stayed on the couches of the few friends who would still talk to him, mostly other bitter, passed-over men who agreed with his rants, but were smart enough not to text them. But their pity ran out quickly. He ended up in a transient hotel in a forgotten suburb of Dallas, a place that rented by the week. His health, once meticulously maintained for his FAA medicals, collapsed. He started drinking heavily. The crisp commanding captain became a slovenly, bitter drunk, boring the other residents of the flophouse with his tales of how she set me up. One day he saw an ad. A small, non-union cargo outfit, Arctic Air Logistics, was hiring dispatchers in Fairbanks, Alaska. It required an aviation background, but not a license. The pay was $18 an hour. He had no other options. He used the last of his money to buy a one-way bus ticket to Alaska. The irony was savage. He had spent his life flying at 43,000 feet, sipping coffee in climate-controlled cockpits, staying in five-star hotels. He was now in a freezing, windowless office, staring at a radar screen, coordinating flights for pilots half his age, flying battered 30-year-old prop planes. His job was to file flight plans, check weather, and coordinate fuel loads. It was the exact work he had mocked Evelyn Reed for, claiming she miscalculated the fuel. Now he did it for poverty wages, and the pilots treated him with open contempt. They all knew his story. The internet was forever. He was that guy. The hard karma wasn't a single event. It was a slow, agonizing slide into irrelevance. It was the daily humiliation of being a footnote in someone else's story. And Evelyn's story? It was just getting started. The lawsuit and the press surrounding it had turned her into a quiet icon. She hadn't sought the spotlight, but the facts of the case were so stark, so black and white, that she became a symbol of corporate integrity and a standing up to old guard prejudice. She used the momentum. She launched the Summit Aviation Diversity Initiative, a $50 million scholarship and mentorship program partnered with Hampton University and other HBCUs, aimed at putting qualified, exceptional minority candidates into the cockpits of high-performance jets. Reed Axton Aerospace stock soared. Arthur Thompson's fleet management contract was just the first of many. Companies wanted to be associated with her. Her reputation for uncompromising excellence in both her flying and her ethics was her brand. She was profiled in Forbes and the Wall Street Journal. She was named Aviation Entrepreneur of the Year. She was invited to speak at global business summits, not about being a black CEO, but about being a brilliant CEO. The fact that she had handled the Harrison incident with such cold, swift precision only added to her legend. She never mentioned Mark Harrison's name in public again. She didn't have to. He had erased himself. She was busy building an empire. 2 years had passed since the incident on the ramp at Teterboro. It was a frigid February night in Fairbanks, Alaska. The temperature outside was 30 below zero. Mark Harrison, now 60, sat in the cramped dispatch office of Arctic Air Logistics. The room smelled of stale coffee and heating oil. He was heavier, his face puffy and red from alcohol, his eyes perpetually bloodshot. The crisp white shirt was gone, replaced by a stained flannel. He was monitoring a flight, a tiny Cessna 208, that was trying to get into Anaktavuk Pass with critical medical supplies. The weather was turning. Arctic 309, Fairbanks. He spoke into the radio, his voice a gravelly monotone. Winds at Anaktavuk are now gusting to 40, visibility dropping to 1/2 mile in snow. The approach is closing. You'll need to divert to Coldfoot. Roger, Fairbanks. The young pilot's voice crackled back, full of frustration. Diverting to Coldfoot. Damn it. Harrison signed the log. Diverted. More paperwork. He hated this job. He hated the cold. He hated the young pilots who thought they knew everything. He hated his life. A cheap, flickering television was mounted in the corner of the office, tuned to a 24-hour news network. He usually ignored it, but a familiar image caught his eye. It was a Gulfstream G650, painted in the sleek silver and black livery of Summit Executive Air. The reporter was standing on a tarmac, not in Fairbanks, but in Geneva, Switzerland, at the European Business Aviation Convention. The buzz of the convention is the new biofuel initiative being spearheaded by Reed Axton Aerospace, the reporter said. CIO Evelyn Reed, herself a G650-rated pilot, just flew this aircraft here from New York on a 100% sustainable aviation fuel blend, a first for a transatlantic flight of this class. The camera panned. There she was. Evelyn Reed. She stepped off the plane, looking exactly as she had that day, poised, powerful, and utterly in command. She wore a sharp business suit, but she carried her own flight helmet, her hair pulled back. She was surrounded by European dignitaries and adoring press. "Ms. Reed," a reporter called out, "you're not just a CEO, you're a pioneer in the cockpit. What drives you to keep pushing the boundaries?" Evelyn smiled, the same smile she had given the Thompsons. "Aviation isn't just a business to me, it's a passion, and it's the future. My goal is to ensure that future is open to everyone, regardless of their background, and sustainable for the planet. We're not just flying, we're leading." Harrison stared at the screen. He was looking at the woman he had called incompetent, the woman he had tried to have fired, the woman who now commanded the global stage, who was changing the very industry he had been kicked out of. He looked at her, then at his own reflection in the dark computer screen. He saw a broken old man, a dispatcher in a frozen wasteland. His radio crackled to life again. "Fairbanks, Arctic 309, on the ground at Coldfoot. Secure for the night." Harrison picked up the mic. He was supposed to say, "Roger, 309. Good night." But he just sat there, silent, staring at the television as Evelyn Reed shook hands with a prince. The young pilot's voice came back, annoyed. "Fairbanks, did you copy? Arctic 309 is on the ground." Harrison finally keyed the mic. The only sound that came out was a dry, choking sob. He clicked it off. He had refused to fly with her. And now he was grounded forever, while she, quite literally, soared to the top of the world. The karma was complete. It wasn't loud or explosive. It was a cold, quiet, and permanent erasure. That's the story of Captain Mark Harrison, a man who thought his seniority and his prejudice gave him power, and Evelyn Reed, the woman who showed him what real power is. Harrison's refusal to fly wasn't just an act of hate. It was a career-ending mistake. He didn't just lose his job, he lost his reputation, his finances, and his entire identity. All while the woman he tried to ground climbed to rule the very skies he'd been banished from. His karma was to become a forgotten man, in a cold, dark room, forced to watch the person he despised change the world. What did you think of his downfall? Was it justified? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. If you enjoyed this story of karma and justice, please hit that like button. Share it with someone who loves a good story, and be sure to subscribe to the channel for more videos just like this one. Thanks for listening.